better for you to unmute yourself and ask to
Okay.
directly to Fase, please.
Yes. So my question.
Yes.
Hello, Bante. Um,
Hello.
2 weeks ago, you said that you mentioned that thinking creates what we experience. And my question is, does that mean that a fully enlightened Buddha doesn't experience?
Fully enlightened Buddha naturally experiences, but he is, from the Mahayana point of view, he is a body of the Dharma. So he does not need, in order to experience, we have to use attention. Attention is a beginning of the mental process. And after attention, we investigate. And when we investigate, then we decide. This is how our mind works. But this is not how according to Mahayana tradition, how the mind of the Buddha works. In Mahayana traditions, they made a very detailed investigation how the mind of the Buddha works and how it is different from our mind, even from the mind of Arahat, even from the mind of the Bodhisattva, even from the mind of the so-called enlightened people. It is very different because the real Buddha represents the wisdom of the mirror mind. That is the wisdom of just reflecting things as they are without what is called samaropa and apavada, without adding something to it and without taking something away from it. And because we are deluded by our thinking and which we believe to reflect reality as it is, so we believe our thinking to be objective, but it is always, even if we are enlightened to a certain extent, it is always subjective. We cannot help have subjective thinking because it is based on the concepts and it is based on the names we put to things, the sentences by which we connect the names, and by the, in case of by aksharas, by the sounds we use to communicate. They create our reality. And this reality is called parikalpita. It is a reality based on concepts, and our dependent origination, which is true way the things are, is based on the reality transmitted to us by our concepts. But this is not the case of the Buddha, because since he has the wisdom of the great mirror, when his alaya, which is the consciousness dwelling in the world, turns into the consciousness beyond the world, then the individual consciousness is a consciousness of sameness. Our consciousness is not same consciousness of sameness. So our thinking also is not sameness. So Buddha sees the individual thinking as the wisdom of sameness, because he's not distant from the mirror. So his consciousness, manovijnana, is a wisdom of beautiful observation, to translate from Chinese, and the five consciousnesses is a wisdom of just accomplishing what one wants. So his all consciousnesses, and there are 8 of consciousnesses in this tradition, they are uh, consciousness is based on the Dharmakaya. Hmm? And Dharmakaya just uh, Dharmakaya does not add anything to reality, does not take away anything to reality, but just reproduce reality as it is. So in absolute sense, it reproduces on the base of the light of wisdom, not on the light of thinking. Hmm? So when you become a perfectly enlightened Buddha, it will take some time. Then you don't need attention, you don't need investigation. You just reproduce the good, the bad, the pleasant, the unpleasant, just as it is without adding anything to it. But we are adding something to it. And that what we are adding is based on what this treatise called the continuity of consciousness. Continuity of consciousness comes from alaya. Due to alaya, we have Vedana, and due to Vedana, we then differentiate. This is also in Theravada Buddhism. And due to differentiation, we have continuity. And our six consciousnesses are based on this continuity, which the true consciousness has no continuity. It is the Dharmakaya has no continuity because everything, as you have seen in this treatise, everything is supposed to be based on it. Huh? So, in that sense, the translators of this treatise were first the missionaries who thought that it is same like a god, but it is not same like a god. Suchness is does not is not the it creates based on avidya. We have explained based on ignorance, but it in itself does not produce anything, because it is in this tradition the true self, the true permanence, the uh, the true bliss, and the true purity. And this true bliss and true purity does not produce anything. Only in connection with ignorance it starts producing. So the in other words, this suchness is the cause, and the ignorance is the conditions. And due to cause and conditions, our reality is created. So, as long as we are not Dharmakaya, we are always connected with ignorance. In this tradition, even the slight remaining remains of ignorance, the habits, they are still even in the Arahat. So the Arahat is still not a Dharmakaya, but he has omniscience in regards to good, bad, and not creating the karma, but he has no omniscience in all aspects because uh, he has not liberated himself from his habits, from the vasana, the latent energies of the mind, which connect us to ignorance. Even when we become arahats, it's almost non-existent, but still, as long as they are habits, they are late energies. So this is this tradition of the Buddha nature. So now most of the Mahayana techniques of meditation are based on this idea of Buddha nature. Hmm? This Buddha nature is the true nature of the mind when you meditate on it. So the thinking becomes something which is completely out of place. And when thinking becomes something which is out of place, then even the objects that the thinking is connected to is also illusory, illusions. So it does not mean they don't exist. They exist, but purely in the relative truth. And in this tradition, suchness is the absolute truth. And the things are produced due to collaboration of suchness and ignorance. The less ignorance, the more light of suchness. Hmm? The uh, the less ignorance, the more light of suchness. The more ignorance, the less light of suchness. Hmm? So uh, you work either with a subtle consciousness, it is explained here, which has more light of suchness, or with the differentiating, discriminating consciousness, which has less or almost no light of suchness. Hmm? Okay,
Thank you, Bante.
we
Yes.
will we will come to it again. So, any other questions? This is very important questions. Question.
Can I ask another question,
So,
maybe?
sure, yes.
So again, 2 weeks ago, you said that this existence happens on the base of the one mind, and this mind is our Buddha nature. And I wonder, when one talks like this, how to distinguish it from a type of monism.
Monism.
Yes, monism.
Yes, actually, it is based on the Mula Madhyamika Karikas. This tradition of Buddha nature is very much connected to the middle way tradition. Huh? And the Nagarjuna explained the middle way as that which does not arise, does not cease, uh, is not eternal, is not the Uchedava, is not nihilism, is not coming, is not going, and is neither plurality nor monism. So we catch things on the base of concepts. This monism is just a concept, but the emptiness and the suchness is not a concept. As this text explains, it is connected with samadhi of suchness. And the samadhi of suchness has the nature of that nothing you can add to it, nothing you can take away from it, because it does not hang on any objects. In Sanskrit, object means something you can hang your mind on. But the nirvana or suchness, you cannot hang the mind on. Hmm? So the illusionary exists because our mind is uh, permeated or uh, say influenced by ignorance, and ignorance is to hang mind on first the subtle mind on continuity and the gross mind on differentiation, like monism. Hmm? Uh, Differentiation is not bad, but the views and tanha and the grasping is based on continuity. Because we have continuity, we have inclination for views and grasping. And these views and grasping, they then are strengthened by these gross kinds of mind. Huh? The mind of grasping and mind of producing concepts and holding to them. Hmm? So actually, the true Buddhism is using philosophy only as a means of going beyond philosophy, using thought to go beyond the thought. And the Buddha nature is beyond the thought. We cannot understand why the thought. We can understand by the faith. So that's why this treatise is called Arising of the Faith in Mahayana. Mahayana being the one mind. We don't see the one mind. But this one mind automatically, as this treatise explains, it has the infinite light of wisdom. What is the infinite light of wisdom? You have no, mind has no abode. It is even in the Dhammapada, you have the same. The liberated mind has no abode. No, it can differentiate, but cannot cling to differentiation. It can, but it differentiates not for itself, it differentiates to help others not to differentiate. Hmm? Okay, so it is getting very hot. Let me. Ah, yeah. We have about 35 degrees here. Okay, so shall we continue or any other questions? Let us continue, otherwise we will get... Anyone has some other question coming along? So let us continue. Huh? Recording is on.
Yes, Master, it's already record.
So as far as I can remember, we finished by explaining that because there is non-understanding of suchness, there is in alaya, that is not said there, but I added to it, in alaya, there is the aspect of no enlightenment. We had two aspects in the alaya, of aspect of enlightenment and aspect of non-enlightenment. And due to this aspect of non-enlightenment, it is said that the thinking, illusionary thinking, arises. And it arises, we have learned, because of this root ignorance which is connected with the karmic consciousness. Because we have karmic consciousness, we have the evolving consciousness on the base of attention. That is called Chuanshe. Then when we automatically, when we have Chuanshe, when we have the evolving consciousness, we have the Xiang Tianshe, which is these three aspects coming together, the karmic aspect, the Tian, Fan, this Dakshina aspect, Sik, and the Nimitta aspect, or the what is seen aspect. Then we have automatically, as long as this happens, then we will have the Vedana, we will have the sensation. On the base of sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, there is a differentiation, continuity. And all this happen in the thinking, in the organ of thinking, which is called manas. And so this is the subtle aspect of avidya, of uh, non-science or of ignorance. And this subtle aspect of ignorance reveal the objects, uh, and with revelation of the objects, there is existence, unless we are enlightened bodhisattvas. Even in the case of someone who has enlightenment based on the differentiating mind, correctly differentiating mind, there is still real existence of the objects. But when one understands this tradition, so all objects are illusionary. Illusionary. As I have explained, the objects mean something we can hang our mind on. But from the very beginning, there is no alambana. There is nothing we can hang mind on. Or object in Sanskrit is called gochara. Gochara means a posture of the mind. So the true mind does not need any posture because it penetrates everything. So this is how the mind conditions the existence of impure phenomena, which uh, again, in turn, perfume the illusionary mind, which again perfume the ignorance, and ignorance perfume the karmic mind, and increase the avidya, the non-science. So avidya perfume karmic consciousness. It produces the uh, aspect of seeing, and the aspect of seer, and the aspect of uh, seeing, which produces the aspect of something we can find pasture on. That means we can hang mind on. And again, this uh, again perfume the ignorance, so that our consciousness become gross and we don't see the light and the eternal aspect of the consciousness. And we produce the gross kinds of consciousnesses. The thinking and create the uh, concepts based on names, sentences, and syllables. And based on them, we then produce a karma and get a bondage of the karma. So this is what how we work in the samsaric existence. How in this tradition we get out of it, understanding the illusionary nature of the uh, phenomena seen by illusionary mind, which is individual mind. And so the mind cling less and less to thinking being something objective. And when it does not cling to thinking, it also reduces the clinging to the objects of thinking, of course, of individual thinking. So that thinking creates all kinds of karmic actions, and as a result, one experiences dukkha, the unsatisfactory state in body and mind, which are, of course, closely connected because in this tradition, the objects are not real. They are also uh, inseparable from the mind. They are, so to say, as the Dhammapada say, they are the content of the mind. But in Theravada tradition, the objects are considered as real. First there is object, then the mind arises. This is called Pure Jata Pratyaya. But in this tradition, first there is mind, then the object can arise. So this permeation by illusion, we start now from the end, illusionary objects. The end is beginning because we believe in the true existence of objects which are never separated from the mind. And because we don't see it, we hang to them. Actually, this mind that hangs to objects, that hangs materiality, is a mind which is not illumined by the Buddha nature. Because we are not illumined by the Buddha nature, we cling to the mind, and because we are not illumined by the Buddha nature, we reject the objects or we grasp the objects. So actually, our getting rid of ignorance in this tradition is to understand the illusionary nature of the objects. From here, we start reducing ignorance, the power of ignorance, which hangs to the objects. Actually, it hangs to the true materiality of the objects. And due to this true materiality of the objects, we hang to the truth of thinking. Well, I have my own experience. Now, somebody has deprived me of the property which
I think fase. Oh, start join again.
me now.
Yes, fase.
So the mind hangs on the materiality, and that is why it creates more and more thinking. I have my own experience. I have been deprived of materiality, which was meant for social service, which was meant for serving Buddhism. I was deprived of it. Now, the person who deprived of me, thinking all impossible and improbable ways how to get out of trouble when he could not achieve his aim. So he is even accusing me uh, of the he does not want to return the money which was meant for publishing a book. He even says that uh, this money was meant for a monk. Now I'm not a monk, and that even not being a monk, where do I get my money? I must be cheating somewhere because I can afford to go to India, which is not what an ordinary citizen can do. No? No. He is thinking and thinking more how to more and more getting involved into how to get out of the trouble. So when one is in trouble, one thinks and thinks and thinks and thinks instead of seeing objectively. He uh, I, by identifying himself with reality, the thinking keeps multiplying, 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 and then if he does not succeed in his thinking, he takes a recourse to lying and to doing all kinds of things in order to uh, save himself for being exposed. So this is how it works. And this is precisely explained here. So first, the illusionary objects we take as something real we can hang our mind on, which we can appropriate for ourselves, which belongs to ourselves. So what arises is the permeation which of the illusionary objects by the mind and by ignorance, and then also permeating suchness so that we don't miss the suchness, so that we multiply, prolong the habit of latent tendencies of thinking, which make us think more and more and more and more. In terms of papancha, the papancha means thinking based on the desire and based on the due to desire we then multiply our thinking until the more we multiply, the more we are deprived of seeing that which we actually are. Then, when we multiply our thinking based on desire to hang our mind on something, especially uh, something which does not belong to us, then second, one intensifies the grasping habit. When one multiplies the thinking based on desire, then one intensifies the grasping habit. So the avidya first permeates karmic consciousness, and such appears the impression of objects. These objects, they permeate the uh, non-science, intensifying our feeling and continuity of the mind, which then, when we lose the subtle way of feeling, subtle way of understanding continuity, which leads to this aspect of grasping and aspect of holding to the concepts, which are connected in this tradition to the six discriminating consciousnesses. The six consciousness being based on the five consciousness and never existing separate from them. Hmm? So this clinging to the discriminating consciousness again intensifies ignorance, which then permeates the suchness to the extent that we completely identify with our wrong views and with our grasping. So this is how we work. You may have had the experience of it. We find, actually, this is very interesting, what we find how illusionary our thinking is when we are in trouble. So the trouble can be a great opener of the Dharma eye. But when we want to conceal something, when we want to uh, add something to reality which is not there, when we want to take something from the reality which is not there, then we, instead of thinking, opening our Dharma eyes, seeing that it is harming us, then it will intensify and together with the grasping habit and the habit of more wrong views. So this is how the illusionary objects penetrate the uh, illusionary thinking, make it work so that we cling more and more to our wrong views and to our grasping, to the extent that we again create more karma, here of course unwholesome karma, and the more bondage. So first we have to understand this hanging our minds to the materiality, to the illusionary objects which cannot exist separated from the mind, which has gross form and subtle form, and that this hanging to the real objects is a gross form of mind, and trying to reduce this hanging is the more subtle form of mind. When we do not see it, then this permeation of ignorance by the illusionary mind becomes very active. And this permeation of uh, by illusionary mind, permeation of what? Of here of ignorance, of course. First, illusionary object permeate the illusionary mind, then illusionary mind permeate the, um, the illusionary mind or thoughts, and the illusionary mind uh, permeates the uh, ignorance to the extent that we don't see our own nature completely, so to say, deprived of seeing our own nature. So first is we have to understand that the objects, which here means, it is not written there, but it is very clear. It means the material objects which we hang our mind on. Then, due to this, our illusionary thinking creates more and more ignorance in our mind. And this ignorance, again, is when we understand that illusionary objects, we should not hang our mind on them, that they don't represent the reality as they are. They are just our subjective view of reality. Then we can reduce our grasping for objects, meaning especially the material objects. then when we reduce our grasping for material objects, we can reduce our grasping for the illusionary mind. And this grasping of the illusionary mind, we come from the gross to the more subtle, is of two kinds. The root permeation by karmic consciousness, due to which arahats, pratyekas, bodhas can experience the dukkha of samsara. Once we are born, even when we become arahats, when we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we are subjected to viparinama dukkha. There are three kinds of dukkha, three kinds of unsatisfactory state. The uh, the state of samsaric mind. We cannot, when we are born, we cannot uh, be, so to say, deprived of thinking, which causes the impermanence. Even when we become a realized bodhisattva, we still have to think. Even when we become the arahats, pratyeka Buddhas, we still have to think, because we are always subjected to change. And we are always subjected to the suffering of sankhara, the suffering of the samskaras of the created, because as long as we are created, our body is created, our mind attached to the body is created. So we are subjected to some kind of unconformed, non-conformed. Because we are subjected to non-conformed, even when we become enlightened, this non-conformed is there. But enlightened people see that it is, this samsara dukkha is not real. For the non-enlightened person, it is very real. But this viparinama dukkha, the, uh, the dukkha of change, is real for all. We cannot jump away from it. It's impossible. Everybody who is born will get sick, will get old age, and will have to experience death. But the enlightened person, he sees it not as something sorrowful, he sees it as a natural process. So he suffers in body, but does not suffer in the mind. But the because we cling to the objects, we cling to the materiality, we see it as something which is really true and which belongs to us, to our real self. So we are in trouble. So this subtle suffering due to karmic consciousness is, even when we become enlightened, it will remain there. But the other suffering, more gross suffering, of is the suffering of one that increases habit of the consciousness of this illusionary mind, which leads to discrimination among things. That means the sixth consciousness discriminates among things. The subtle consciousness sees, differentiates due to karmic consciousness, due to habits, due to continuity, but it does not cling to the discriminating consciousness, to the differentiating consciousness, which is called actually the the discriminating among things. Fantia Sh means vastu, the basis. The bases are the inner bases, outer bases. And due to this discriminating among the bases, the inner and outer bases among the things, the eye and the color and so on, as something which is real and which one should hang mind on and be attached to and have views of it and grasp for it. And due to this, the commoners, those who are not enlightened, experience bondage of karma. This bondage of karma in the Chinese tradition is called Fen Tuan Shen Se, which means the bondage of the creating new karmic existence on the base of grasping and on the base of holding to the concepts. We, as being the real, as being the real basis, being there in reality. So it deprives us of direct seeing of our nature. So this Fentuan Shensa or samsaric circles is the circles of creating new karma and new bondage. So this in other words, this continuity of the mind causes two kinds of samsara dukkha. This karma vijnana supports ignorance, avidya, so one cannot leave thinking. This is very subtle. This is very subtle. And this, because one cannot leave thinking, one cannot leave this viparinam dukkha, the dukkha based on change, because thinking is a process of change. And due to thinking, we consider the samsaric existence as something real. And this is the first, the basic subtle dukkha, which we cannot get rid of as long as we are thinking. And even the arahat, even the enlightened person, even the enlightened bodhisattva, he has to use thinking to understand how to perfect his paramis. So the second is a more gross, and it is based on discrimination. If one has a subtle thought, then one has viparinama dukkha, the suffering based on change, because the thinking is a change. But one, if one is enlightened, one has penetrated the sankhara dukkha, this dukkha of compounded, holding to the compounded. The compounded is not real, because one has seen something which is beyond compounded. So the dukkha is very subtle. As to the cross consciousness, that is the second kind that increases the habit of discrimination of the due to which we then grasp to wrong views and to desires. So this due to this views, mostly wrong views, and the desires or tanha or thirst become very prominent. And so one holds more to objects and creates new karmas and new bondage. So we go even to more subtle. We go to the beginning of that which deprives us of being in the our true nature, and that is the permeation by ignorance. First is permeation by the true belief in true objects being there. Second, this creates a holding to the thoughts. When we penetrate the holding to the thoughts, we can penetrate the holding to the ignorances being also not real. So ignorance is of three kinds. Ignorance is of the perversion due to perception, perversion due to perversion, due to uh, perversion due to perception, perversion due to perception leads to perversion due to views, and perversion due to views leads to perversion due to discriminating consciousness. Three kinds of ignorance based on seeing the impermanent as permanent, seeing the impermanent as bliss, and seeing the impermanent uh, as true self. Due to this, we are permeated by consciousness, which permeates, as we have seen, the illusionary thought, and illusionary thought permeates the illusionary objects, which we take to be really there through something to hang the mind on. So we come to the source, to ignorance, and ignorance is also of two kinds. The root permeation, the ignorance permeates suchness. This is a root permeation which can accomplish karmic consciousness. And karmic consciousness, as we have seen, is never separated from the seer, the seen, the Vedana, differentiating on the base of Vedana, and continuity. So these are the five consciousnesses which are called manas. It is the subtle consciousness. So as long as there is ignorance, so even in the case of the bodhisattva or the arahat, there will be this this continuity. But the arahat, he learns not to hold to it. But the ordinary people, they are holding to it. Then we have permeation by drishti and trishna, by wrong views and by desire, by thirst, which leads to clinging, especially clinging to materiality, which accomplishes the discriminating consciousness. That means the consciousness which differentiates among the facts, which discriminates among the facts. I, something real, and the colors as something real, ear as something real, and the sounds as something real, without seeing that actually the root is not in the eye and not in the uh, colors, but in the mind itself. So the first one is a subtle kind of consciousness, that is these five consciousnesses, the continuity of consciousness. So avidya in this subtle form permeates suchness, and so that the suchness produces the karma, vijnana, the karmic consciousness, and with it, these five consciousnesses responsible for continuity. So this is the subtle form which only the realized bodhisattva can see. But this subtle form, when we don't see it, then it gives rise to views and to desire. When we see it, it will reduce. When we don't see it, it will give rise. Then we have the secondary ignorance, which was mentioned before, permeates illusionary thinking and becomes the discriminating consciousness, the six kind of consciousnesses which are gross. So from end to the beginning, then as before we have to go also from beginning to the end. And from beginning to the end is from the suchness consciousness, from the one mind, from the Buddha nature. This Buddha nature, because it is connected with ignorance, it is also connected with vasanas, with latent tendencies. But when the consciousness of suchness permeates the ignorance, then the suchness non-stop produce the pure karmas. This production of the pure karmas by suchness never ends. But the production of the, we will see also it described later in this treatise, production of the polluted dharmas, polluted phenomena by ignorance can cease. But it ceases only when our mind becomes suchness, becomes the our true nature. So this is the difference. The creation by ignorance, which is based on suchness, has beginning, but can have an end. But the creation by suchness has no beginning and no end. It is always there, because it is the very nature of suchness to permeate everything. The light of suchness permeates everything. So how is it explained? Here, because there is the dharma or suchness, it permeates avidya. Whether we are aware of it or mostly not aware of it, the suchness, which is the true nature of things, permeates non-science, which prevents us from being one with suchness, one with emptiness, one with the mind which does not dwell anywhere, which is called in the Dhammapada Anoka, the non-dwelling mind. But in this tradition, even the mind of Arahat, because he has still some habits, some vasanas, has a very, very, very subtle latent tendencies. That's why he still have to think, and he still has a tendency to regard the outer objects of something being still there. So the treaty says, in my translation, due to the strength of the causes and conditions of this permeation by suchness, beings are disenchanted, nibida or nirveda. Again, we come from beginning to the middle, are disenchanted in mind. The mind or thinking is in the middle. Middle of everything is the mind. So that's why the Dhammapada says that all the phenomena are contained in the mind, mano maya. Chitena niyate loko, the world is governed by the mind, is controlled by the mind. It is actually in the mind. This is not the word of the Yogacara, this is a word of the Dhammapada, but explained in a different way. So, because everything dwells in mind, when we have this, understand this permeation by suchness, then due to it, we beings, we are nirveda, we are disenchanted in mind from samsara dukkha, from the suffering of impermanence. Because we are disenchanted, nirveda, from the suffering of impermanence, so we seek happiness not in materiality, not in grasping, not in views, not in desires, but we seek happiness in nirvana. So, Sri Mala Devi Sutra says that actually the Buddha nature, the Tathagata Garbha, permeates the 6 or 5 gatis, 6 or 5 spheres of existence in which we beings, we are moving. That's why they are called gatis. They are movements from one to another. We are moving because we have not penetrated the true consciousness. The true consciousness does not move. The consciousness which moves, moves on the basis of the karmic consciousness, which creates the impression of the seer and the seen and Vedana, that means the sensation, and on the base of sensation, then the continuity. Because as Chula Vedana Sutta explains, we differentiate on the base of Vedana. When we don't have Vedana, we don't have perception. And when we don't have perception, now you can hear me.
Yes, Pastor. Now can hear. Please, Pastor.
So sorry, it's beyond our ability to improve. We just are dependent on the conditioning, and now we can see it more clearly. When we create good conditionings, we have good life. When bad conditioning, bad life. Hmm? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, Pastor, can hear.
So very important. The suchness permeate ignorance, so that we have the karmic consciousness and so on. This is the root permeation or root latent tendency. So because of this permeation, we then rely on thinking as something objective, and we rely on the objects that we grasp through thinking as something really being there. So the strength of uh, ignorance increases. And it increases because, again, the impression of the true objects permeate the thinking, and thinking permeates the uh, continuity, and continuity permeates the karmic consciousness, and karmic consciousness again permeates the suchness. And so there is always two-way traffic. Either the permeation of suchness predominates, or the permeation of ignorance predominates. When we understand the illusionary nature of the objects, the suchness permeation increases. When we understand the illusionary nature of thinking based on real objects being there, then the suchness permeation increases. And when finally we understand the illusionary nature of ignorance, the illusionary nature of karmic consciousness, we come to the beginning, and we can uh, eventually unite with what we truly are, true consciousness, the suchness consciousness. So suchness permeates ignorance, and ignorance in turn permeates the suchness. And this is how we beings work. But this is not the conditioning of the Buddha, but it is the conditioning of us who are not Buddhas. Even if when we are enlightened, this conditioning becomes on the, the part of the power, Shakti, of suchness permeation. In when we are non-enlightened, the power of the permeation by ignorance can increase. But when we meditate on the illusionary nature of objects on which we hang our mind and to which we grasp, such creating uh, views and desires, which create more thinking, more ignorance, and more ignorance create more karmic consciousness, and so the Shakti, the power of ignorance increases to the extent we don't see our own nature. Now, the treaty says if there is confidence, this treatise is called How Do We Come? Now we come to the description how to become true enlightened. Hmm? First, we have to go from ignorance to suchness, now from suchness to ignorance. So if we understand something from suchness, we have confidence, we have faith, we have shraddha in one's nature. One's nature is suchness, but we don't see it. But we realize it when we practice according to the Bodhisattva path, the 10 kinds of faith. In the 10 kinds of faith, all the positive qualities are contained. So as we will see later, one who has realized the true faith, his powers are even more according to the scripture than the power of the arahants. Because the power of changing impermanent consciousness is always limited, but the power of a true consciousness is non-limited. So in the practice of the 10 faith is already all the important things we need. The faith, the right effort, the mindfulness, the wisdom, the concentration, the correct learning, the correct wisdom of hearing, the correct wisdom of contemplation. And so our mind gets power because we rely on suchness. So if there is confidence in one's nature, one knows that mind's movement is illusionary. Unless we have understanding of suchness, we will not understand that our mind movement is illusionary. So the true understanding of the illusionary nature of the mind actually is only when we become the Bhumi Bodhisattvas, the realized Bodhisattvas. But it is very difficult. But when we become, when we realize faith, or when we become enlightened as the uh, disciples, then we have opened the Dharma Chakku. So we don't cling to our thoughts so much, but still we cannot avoid thinking. But we may know that there is no real gochara, there is no real objects we can hang the mind on, as there is no real object there in front of the mind. Thus, one cultivates aloofness from Dharma. The aloofness from Dharma means actually upeksha. When we have upeksha, we are aloof from the all phenomena. You cannot grasp for suchness, for emptiness, for nirvana. That's why it is nirvana. But yet you can still differentiate on the base of nirvana and samsara, which still cannot help thinking. But once you understand that the real objects are not there to hang the mind on, to get a pasture on, that the real pasture is the mind itself, then one will have aloofness from the Dharma. So one can attain, one can become the Bhumi Bodhisattva. The Bhumi Bodhisattva is one who has, so to say, accomplished the Dana Parami. He has nothing to hang the mind on. He has nothing to grasp. So these 10 bhumis are connected with the practice of the 10 paramis or 6 paramis, because the last 4 paramis, they are the complementary paramis. So when one has understood that there are no real objects to hang the mind on, then actually one has accomplished the 10 practices of parinama, punya parinama. One does not keep anything for himself. If one does not keep anything for oneself, one becomes the realized bodhisattva, the Bhumi Bodhisattva. We are not the Bhumi Bodhisattvas because we still have some things to which we consider to be belong to ourselves, to be in ourselves, to be of ourselves. Then, knowing according to truth, yatha bhuta jnana, knowing according to the way the things really are, that there are no real things before us. That means no real objects, nothing to hang the mind on. That is, we have attained the pramudita bhumi, we have attained the bhumi of always rejoicing. Always rejoicing is a state when we are always never aloof from suchness, from the truth of suchness. What a joy. So when we never aloof from the truth of suchness, we use all kinds of skillful means. For the bodhisattva, that is a parami of the shila, parami of the kshanti, and so on, the 6 paramis and the 4 complementary paramis, the perfections of which, according to Asanga, brings us to the 10 bhumi, the mega, dharma mega, when we actually are facing the uh, true nature of Dharmakaya with minimum cloud, with minimum obstacles, so we can actually realize we are at the stage of realizing the true mind, the true nature of the mind. So when we actually attain the Bodhisattva Bhumi, so we are never aloof from Dharma, we are knowing things according to the truth that they are empty in their own nature. So we are always connected with the happiness of the presence of Dharma, which is also connected with upeksha. With upeksha actually uh, means seeing from near, upa-iksha. But seeing from near, upa also has this prefix, it has also the meaning of not seeing. Not seeing real objects means seeing from near. This is very wonderful meaning, which is not explained in Chinese because the Chinese does not have this uh, double meaning of the upeksha. So the upeksha, we say detachment, actually means uh, seeing from near, which means non-seeing at all, non-seeing nothing one can hang the mind on. There is nothing in the world to dwell on. So when one sees nothing in the world to dwell on, then one uses all these skillful means, all the paramis, to realize the true mind, which is suchness. So this is the practice of conformation, conformation or adaptation to the suchness, which is a true nature of the mind. And this true nature of the mind does not grasp, it does not think. The true nature of the mind does not need to think. It is we have seen, it is the karmic consciousness which makes us think. So uh, things it knows that non-thinking, we have seen it in the beginning, is bring us to conformity, to realization of the true mind. So he practices for the long mind until he becomes one with his true mind. So during the long period of time, he then removes all arising of gocharas, all arising of objects that one can hang the mind on. And such, due to the power of the vasana, of the permeation, you hear me now?
Yes, Master.
So, due to this permeation of suchness, which has been completed when one has attained, when one minds become suchness, that is the marga phala, that is the true fruit of the path. Here is the Mahayana path, of one mind, which contains all minds. So one comes to the cessation of permeation or latent tendencies of ignorance in mind. So these latent tendencies of ignorance in mind, which makes us rely on illusionary thinking as something which is really has own existence, and due to this, the objects which it creates having a real existence, then mind does not give rise to thought. So there is no idea of the moving mind creating the impression of the seer and the seen. When the moving mind creates no impression of the seer and the seen, then the thoughts do not arise. So the continuity becomes completely unreal, a dream. And one sees these beings as being in a dream. This is the nature of the Buddha. When Buddha understood the reality, he saw us, beings who are still immersed in reality, as being in a dream. So he started his journey of awakening, bringing us to the real, which is in this tradition the Buddha nature, the true nature of the mind, or the true mind, Zhen in Chinese. Because we don't understand the Zhen, we rely on Yeshe, on the karmic consciousness. When we rely on karmic consciousness, we have Chuan, the evolving consciousness. When we rely on evolving consciousness, we have automatically the revealing consciousness. When we have revealing consciousness, we have sensation. When we have sensation, we have continuity. And when we do not penetrate this subtle process, we get involved in discrimination. And this discrimination strengthens our ignorance instead of reducing it. So, in this tradition, the enemy of suchness or true mind is the prapancha, it's the uh, continuity of thought based on desire. Desire for what? Of course, for grasping the outer object as being something real, as being something one can really hang the mind on, and one can appropriate it to the real self, which is the product of the thinking, not of the real experience. So, the when one has attained the true mind, the suchness mind, so the idea of real objects being there on which one can hang the mind stops. In its turn, as causes and conditions, which means the ignorance and the objects of ignorance, they both cease. And so the Chitta Lakshana, the characteristics of mind, based on the objects to be grasped, based on the nimittas, based on the signs. The mind has itself has no characteristics. Only when it, so to say, it holds to the characteristics of the objects as being real, then it has characteristics. It has the mental factors which differentiate these characteristics. And if we don't penetrate this process, then holds to them as something being really there. But when this holding to the Chitta Lakshana, to the Xin Xiang, to the characteristics created in the mind, which mind? The thinking mind. When they are exhausted, when they have ceased, this is attaining nirvana. According to this tradition, the bodhisattva practice, which is based on the subtle consciousness, understanding the illusionary nature of continuity, that if one understands this illusionary nature of continuity and the truth of the real mind, of the suchness mind, according to this Mahayana tradition, then the practice of the bodhisattvas is much faster, because he is dealing with a subtle mind, not with a gross mind, which holds to the object as being real. So of suchness, we have seen the nature of the enlightened mind. The alaya has, we have explained enlightened concept and non-enlightened concept. The enlightened concept we have learned is based on the light of wisdom, infinite light of wisdom, and the unthinkable karma. Here it is called Ziranye, spontaneous karma. Spontaneous karma is without thinking, adopting to the conditions. So let us maybe stop here, because we're going to a new topic, which is, again, we have permeation by the true mind, and now we come next topic, permeation by the illusionary mind. So due to the permeation by the true mind, we can realize the enlightened aspect of alaya connected with the spontaneous acting, with the unthinkable acting. I will explain more about it in the next lecture, before we go to the permeation by illusionary mind. This permeation by the true mind is based on the correct vipassana, correct wisdom, which discriminates according to Asanga tradition. It is not mentioned here, between the nama, between the concept, the vastu, the thing we experience through the concept. The nama is the parikalpita, the fabricated reality. The vastu is the the reality of causes and conditions. Let's call it like this. But in our case, it is based on concepts. That is, then when we understand that nama is not same as vastu, that parikalpita is not same as that paratantra is based on parikalpita is illusionary, then we understand that no phenomena on which the concepts are imposed has any true nature, swabhava, that this true nature is false, and then that the differentiation based on true nature is also false. So we do not rely on thinking. So let us continue next lesson and see how to understand not relying on illusionary thinking, so that we get more and more clarity about our true mind, which is actually suchness. So let us finish here for today, and we continue not in next week. We decided because next week I will be flying to Mumbai, and next week the condition of reception should be better. I will be in Mumbai, and that should be okay, hopefully. So let us, as usual, transfer merit for the benefit of all sentient beings, and let us try our best to get the best of this wisdom, so that we understand more of the true Buddhist teachings. 愿以这功德普济一切，我等一众生皆共成佛道。May the merits of this practice spread to all beings, so that we attain the state of perfection, the true mind. Omitobo. So please prepare some good questions for the next lesson, and we continue, and hopefully we will benefit more and more from the wisdom of whoever the author of this treatise may be. Okay.
Thank you, 法师。
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Pastor.
Thank
Okay,
you
bye.
so much.
Bye teman-teman.
Bye, Yana, Johan, Pak Hip,
Terima
Supri.
kasih teman-teman. Thank you,
Yo,
friends.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.